All right, you guys, today's lecture topic is all about what does the bureaucracy do? And the focus is going to be to look at the role of the bureaucracy as both implementers of policy and creators of regulations. So the whole idea with the bureaucracy, and I think we kind of established this earlier in the week, is that it's their job to essentially take the idea and intent of a law and turn it into action. So turning the idea, the philosophy, into something that is actionable that we can follow and then enforce. So they do this through creating rules, regulations, and then of course finding different ways to enforce them. So for their bureaucracy, their number one job really is to implement the laws. So the executive branch is where the laws are implemented and enforced. So the bureaucracy is going to create policy based on the laws that Congress has made, executive orders the president has given, court decisions, and then they are going to develop the procedures, the rules, etc., for actually implementing that policy. So when we talk about policy implementation, we're talking about the fact that they are the ones that will actually do the detail, the dirty work, you could say, of turning the laws that Congress passed into actual policy. So they will create, develop, and implement programs necessary. And they'll do this through, again, writing regulations, so rules and standards to meet. They'll figure out how it'll be enforced, and then, of course, they're going to have to spend money because it's going to probably cost something for an agency to be able to go forward and carry out the policies that need to be made in accordance to the law passed. Now, it's important to know that policies are not self-executing. What we mean by that is there's not a clear-cut roadmap here. The laws that are made by Congress are generally very vague, and so it's up to the bureaucracy to work out the details. What does it mean? They have to fill in the gaps. And if you remember that term delegated authority, right? So they're given the power, they're given the go-ahead essentially from Congress to work out those details. And then they have discretion, right? They have discretionary authority because of their expertise. We trust that they're going to make sound decisions. They're going to use their discretion to figure out what is the best pathway forward here. So Congress will give the bureaucracy the decisions to make the rules, the regulations, etc., as they see fit, as necessitated by the laws or executive orders, etc., that were passed. Bureaucratic agencies, independent regulatory commissions, and those different cabinet departments will all have discretionary authority. Now, the way that things are implemented are very critical because, again, we're translating policy goals that were established through law or executive order or court ruling and then turning them into regulations, rules, and guidelines that ultimately we all have to follow, that we all are abiding by. So in addition to discretionary and delegated authority, the bureaucracy has what we call rulemaking authority, where they are given the authority to create those rules, those regulations that accompany a policy. And it's important to note that all rules and regulations are rooted in law. So they don't come from anywhere. They're rooted in the legislation that was passed or the executive order given. And then it's up to the bureaucracy to coordinate the necessary resources to make sure that a policy can be successfully implemented. So in that aspect, we look at manpower and money. So manpower, which agency is going to be responsible for it? Is it going to be the responsibility of one agency, or is it something that's going to span across several? Who's going to bear that responsibility for making sure that implementation goes smoothly? And then money. How much money is this going to cost? How much money do we have to spend? Are we going to have to request additional money in the next year's budget to make this happen? So I wanted to take a little bit of a closer look at discretionary authority and rulemaking authority. So if you would please go to your copy of this presentation, the one linked on Canvas, and click Read This. It's a brief little PDF and then a couple questions to answer on the following slide. So pause here, complete that reading, and then we'll reconvene. Okay, so final thoughts on this topic, just looking at bureaucracies as regulators. Generally, bureaucracies will be regulating things in the private sector, and they do this through regulations. So regulations are instructions, formal instructions that bureaucratic agencies or departments will issue along with implementing laws. So again, it's turning laws into actions. What are we enforcing? And all of these are traced back to legislation. So with that delegated authority, the bureaucracy has the power to put these regulations into action and also to enforce them and make sure that people are in compliance with the rules, with the standards, the practices that have been put in place. Bureaucratic departments, agencies, and commissions all have the power to enforce regulations, and they can do this in a couple different ways. They can issue fines for noncompliance. So if you are not following the guidelines that have been put in place, bureaucratic agencies can issue a fine as a penalty, and they can also pursue litigation. And what we mean by that is suing in court for noncompliance. And usually the result of that then is going to be some sort of financial penalty as well. So big ideas here then, in terms of what the bureaucracy does. It's all about turning these ideas that Congress and the President have into actual actions. All right, guys, so that is it. If you have not already done so, your other task for the day and this async day is to finish up the recap questions that go along with that bureaucracy breakouts. I'll see everybody on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend.